Earlier at the beginning of this month, Cyberpunk 2077 was receiving some backlash for what the industry likes to call crunch. Crunch is a concept, probably don't have to explain it, but I will if you are new to this topic. It is basically where a corporation or some large monolith company forces people, their employees, to work overtime without really any incentive or perhaps the promise of a bonus, and then usually that bonus gets rescinded depending on how the game does. It can't always be fulfilled, and we're going to talk about it and whether or not it's bad or if it's good or if it's necessary or just what it really means to be an employee who has to face the idea of crunch. So, from Polygon, this was out on October 7th, and I'm sorry this is just now coming up currently, but shit happened and I couldn't get to it, so I'm doing it now. Cyberpunk 2077, crunch backlash, misinformation, and fandom warp the public's perception. In late September, Bloomberg reported on changing working conditions at CD Projekt Red, the Polish developer behind the upcoming highly anticipated Cyberpunk 2077. Despite previously promising that its workers would not be subjected to extended overtime hours, CDPR was going back on its word and now making crunch mandatory. Intellectually, most people would probably agree the idea of crunch, which refers to periods of intense and extended overtime, is bad. Workers would be fairly compensated for their time, the thinking goes, and they shouldn't be stretched so thin that they risk burning out. And yet, the gaming industry has seen numerous reports, many of them from Bloomberg and former Kotaku colleague Jason Schreier, about poor working conditions at so many major studios that it feels like some fans have normalized the concept. There hasn't been a big reckoning here. Even high-profile games with documented cases of crunch like Red Dead Redemption 2 have gone on to sell millions, while some developers have promised to improve with a looming holiday season and a new console generation. Push has come to shove. If anything, after years of reading similar reports, it's starting to feel like some of the video game fans have normalized crunch. Many gaming enthusiasts' response to CD Projekt's Red decision hasn't been condemnation or critique. It has been people debating whether or not the working conditions are truly bad, especially compared to other documented cases of crunch. First of all, what's wrong with debating? This is the thing that annoys me about these type of sites, is they automatically think that you have to agree with whatever their opinion is, good or bad. Things are nuanced, guy. Life is not black and white. There's a lot of frickin' gray. And when it comes to crunch, it's not always a terrible thing. What makes crunch terrible, and I will talk about that later in this video, is when a company says, if you don't work this overtime, then I'm going to replace you. That is evil. That is messed up. Not catering to your workers' needs in the time of crunch is bad. For example, if I made all my employees work 70-hour work weeks, but I wasn't providing them with food or necessary breaks or cycling them in properly, there are things that you have to understand about the entertainment industry. They have deadlines. There's billions of dollars on the line. And I get it. We as a society occasionally, and I would argue more than not, put money and material over an actual human being. And that's just frickin' wrong. However, owning a company and owning an IP or an intellectual property or a game or a movie, it's not simple. There's a lot that goes into it. When you're working on these big projects, you have to spend a lot of time on it. Your life is this project for X amount of years, whether it's a movie, an album, or a video game. And you have to understand, a lot of these employees like working hard. They like working hard. They like working on these projects. They love it. It's their passion. It's their hobby. They would rather do nothing else. So I think they justify that. However, there needs to be a healthy balance. I would not argue that at all. But the opinion of it just being bad because overworking people is bad, that doesn't hold any weight. Some people like to work. Some people don't have lives. Maybe they prefer to do that. In a recent YouTube video recounting Bloomberg's reporting, many of the comments made comparisons to other worse studios, or they note if the mandatory overtime is paid, it can't be that bad. Yes, so I agree about the mandatory overtime comment, but yeah, there are worse studios. It's totally fine to say that there are worse studios. What a cruel world, one comment sarcastically begins, being employed during a pandemic where thousands are being fired every minute and being paid extra for hours at the office. Really unacceptable and heartbreaking. Again, that is a nuanced, it's a sarcastic and rude take, but there's also nuance there. These people should be grateful they have jobs. They should be grateful they're working on projects that they love. And as long as the corporation is taking their employees' lives into consideration and the employees don't mind doing what they're doing, and there's no, what's the word I'm looking for? When you basically say, if you don't do this or else, as long as there's no component where the employee is going to get fired for not choosing to do overtime, well, then I don't see a problem with the employees choosing to do that. The YouTuber who created that video, Yang Ya ended up acknowledging in a comment that the video is getting a lot of flack for holding CD Projekt Red to any sort of standard. Mandating crunch after promising not to is simply not a good look, and sustained crunch should not be normalized or as necessary to make games. It's not necessary in the entertainment industry. This is not exclusive to video games. The video game industry maybe have more crunch, as I've been told by a friend who has friends in the industry, and that's because of the way fans want content. And I do agree that that's not necessarily a good thing. However, these people like working in these industries. They want these jobs, and some people will work their ass off for little to no pay. And I think that's where we should kind of be putting our concern. Crunch in the entertainment industry is a normal thing. And then these people won't work for months at a time. You have to understand that. I had a friend in Los Angeles who worked in the production industry in movies, and he wouldn't work for months at a time. And then all of a sudden he would be working 20-hour days for 3 months in a row, and then he wouldn't work for 6 months. That's just kind of how it is. And I'm not saying that's good or bad. I'm just saying that these projects are intense. They're huge. They're large. So just saying that it's bad without understanding the nuance behind it is ignorant. Top comment here in Yang Ya's response: CDPR is our Lord and Savior. There are a number of negative responses to both Yang Ya's whatever, blah, blah, blah. This Justin McDaniel LGBT guy says, have you noticed that everyone defending crunch always says, I've had to do crunch and overtime a lot at my job? The age-old mentality of if I had to suffer, everyone else should too. No, that's not what that means. Again, with the blanket statements. Basically, if you work hard at your job and you like your job and you want to work hard and you want to stay, that's like a dominantly male characteristic. So who cares? If they want to work hard at their job and stay extra, that's fine. Some people like to have a balance of both work and family and friends. More power to them. Then they shouldn't have to stay. But if people want to, that's their right. Perhaps this fervent fandom was inevitable. Many would argue that CD Projekt Red developed one of the greatest video games in history, The Witcher 3. The base game was so tremendously meaty that most people I know barely make a dent in it. On top of that, the game received 16 pieces of free add-on content, the expansions and DLC that had a price tag. They were reasonably priced and substantial in a way that makes the rest of the industry looks like it was selling food scraps. In this case, this kind of goes back on what I was saying about in the movie industry, you'll work for 6 months to a year, and then you won't work for a few years because you basically have to look at this at the entertainment industry as you kind of work a year or two's worth of work into a couple months or a year, and then that just kind of stretches out and lasts you. But with the video game industry, since fans want content streamlined to them constantly, like with Fortnite or with DLC, a lot of these people have to continue working even after they were just working crunch for X amount of time. It's hard to picture how a company that would do so many great things for its customers could at the same time be capable of not so great things. CD Projekt Red is the good guy, right? In some ways, it's easy to continue imagining CD Projekt Red as a small outfit punching way above its weight. Cyberpunk 2077 is the first major game the studio has developed, spin-offs notwithstanding. According to Schreier, part of the disconnect comes from pure misinformation. As commenters take reporting and recount it to their viewers, details might get changed or not explained with the nuance and context presented in the original report, which is what you're doing, my guy. You're literally sitting here saying that this thing is bad without understanding the nuance, like your ex-reporter said. Maybe that's why he got promoted. One of the leading misconceptions about CD Projekt Red's situation, for example, is that mandatory crunch merely lasted for a short period of time before going gold once per week for 7 days total. So as you could see in that previous article, Cyberpunk and CD Projekt Red was getting slammed for their crunch. However, misinformation was presented again because nuance is always critical and nothing is as black and white as it seems. It's been claimed by the Cyberpunk 2077 developers that they chose to work this overtime rather than delay the game yet again. So they chose to sacrifice their time for fans. Now we can argue whether that's good or bad. I would say it's somewhere in between. It shows that they really care and that they want to get this game out there because they want us to see what they're working on. However, I don't want these people to lose parts of their lives to make a frickin' video game. That's silly. This is why I think Call of Duty should be delayed. This is why I think it was the right call for Doom Eternal to get delayed. I am fine with delays in projects. I think it's a good thing. But to act like this industry isn't just super hard to get into, super competitive, people will choose to work longer hours so that the next guy doesn't get in and take his place. That's just the nature of entertainment. It's a hard business, man. On the Game Informer show, the comments came into the video at the 58-minute mark. Liana Rupert goes into detail about the previous claim that CD Projekt Red bosses imposed a mandatory 6-day week on devs, saying, from what I understand, they were just saying, hey, do we want to delay this again because we're almost there and we need a little bit more time, or should we just add another day in our schedule? Well, they chose to add another day in their schedule. Rupert goes on to say that from what I understand, it was a mass majority agreeing to the 6-day work week. Finally, Rupert stresses there's a big difference between the American and Polish work cultures, and that no one I spoke to over there saw it as crunch. That's another thing. Cyberpunk 2077 has been delayed twice since it was announced for an original release in April 2020. Since then, it's been delayed till November, coming up very soon. And that's the whole shebang. I'm going to give you an example of what actual crunch is, okay? A friend of mine works at an automotive company. Not going to say his name, not going to say the person's name that had to experience crunch. My buddy went downstairs to go help in the warehouse. He had found out, he didn't even know this, but he had found out that these guys were working 7/12s. They were working 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. That's insane. And the company basically said, if you don't do this, you're out of here. One of the gentlemen who was working these 7/12s, his fiance died at the beginning of the year. I think it was not COVID related. And he hasn't even had time to grieve her. He never had time for a funeral. He never had time. I don't even think he could have the funeral because of COVID. Never had time to grieve his fiance. And he's like in his 30s. That is crunch. That is dictatorial from a corporation standard, from being greedy and putting their employees last and putting money first and production first. That is evil. In the entertainment industry, these people want to be working hard. This is their lives, okay? Now, I'm not going to compare YouTube exactly to this because it's a lot easier in my opinion. However, when I'm working on YouTube, I wake up, I research articles, I'm watching other YouTube videos, I'm creating YouTube videos, I'm writing scripts, and I basically do this all day. I mean, I take breaks to eat and shower and stuff, but I'm pretty much doing it the whole day. And these guys are sitting at their desks, animating and using Maya and coding, and it's just their lives. These people would be doing this anyway, and I'm not saying that justifies it because these people do need to have lives. Of course, they do need to have that 9 to 5 aspect, and games should be delayed more because it would make the games better. That being said, with competitive amounts of money being thrown around this industry, with all of the high intensity work ethic of these people, with the amount of content that fans want, there has to be some expectation of hard work ethic. And there has to be an expectation that we have to work X amount of hours and just grind it out until we save up our little nest egg while we're in our 30s, grinding it out. And you have to decide what's important to you. And if you don't want this type of job, you don't have to pick it, okay? And again, as long as CD Projekt Red or Activision or whatever these companies are doing are not making their employees work 7/12s and making them miss funerals and making them not be able to grieve their wife or their fiance, well, I think that the conversation should be a little more nuanced in understanding the gray and individuality, cultural differences like this guy said about from American and Polish work culture. Nothing is black and white. Nothing is as easy as it seems. This industry is super, super intense. And a lot of people just don't have that work ethic, and that's why they're not cut out for it, which is why they're working a 9 to 5, some easy job that they can just skate through at an office rather than grinding in the entertainment industry. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Have a good day.